The history of Nizari Ismailism from the founding of Islam covers a period of over 1,400 years. It begins with Muhammad's mission to restore to humanity the universality and knowledge of the oneness of the divine within the Abrahamic tradition, through the final message and what the Shia believe was the appointment of Ali as successor and guardian of that message, with both the spiritual and temporal authority of Muhammad through the institution of the Imamate. A few months before his death, Muhammad, who resided in the city of Medina, made his first and final pilgrimage to Mecca, the Farewell Pilgrimage. There, atop Mount Arafat, he addressed the Muslim masses in what came to be known as the Farewell Sermon. After completion of the Hajj pilgrimage, Muhammad journeyed back toward his home in Medina with the other pilgrims. During the journey, Muhammad stopped at the desert oasis of Qum and requested other pilgrims gather together, and he addressed them with the famous words, "Whose Mawla I am, this Ali is also his Mawla. O God, befriend whosoever befriends him and be the enemy of whosoever is hostile to him." Quote, "This is known as the event of Ghadir Qum, which is remembered in the hadith of the Pond of Qum." Following Muhammad's death, the Shia or party of Ali believed he had been designated not merely as the political successor to Muhammad but also his spiritual successor, and looked toward Ali and his most trusted supporters for both political and spiritual guidance. Ali's descendants were also the only descendants of Muhammad, as Ali had married Muhammad's only surviving progeny, his daughter Fatima. Through the generations, the mantle of leadership of the Shia passed through the progeny of Ali and Fatima, the Ahl al-Bayt, embodied in the head of the family, the Imam. Both Ismaili and 12 Shia accept the same initial Imams from the descendants of Muhammad through his daughter Fatima, and therefore share much of their early history. The Zaydi are distinct. The modern Nizari faith refers to itself as a tariqa or path, the term for a Sufi order, following centuries hiding from oppression as 12 tariqa. Imam-A Shia, Jafar al-Sadiq, was acknowledged leader of the Shia and head of the Ahl al-Bayt. A highly accomplished theologian, Jafar tutored Abu Hanifa, who would go on to found the Hanafi madhab, the largest Sunni legal school practiced today. Malik ibn Anas, founder of the Maliki Sunni madhab, and Wazil ibn Atta, who founded the Mu'tazila theology that all the major Sunni madhabs follow. During a period of rapid change, when Muslims no longer threatened were beginning to concern themselves with questions like, what does it mean to be a Muslim? Most sought answers from the new learned classes, which would eventually develop into Sunni Islam. But for some, the answers to such questions were always sought from the Ahl al-Bayt led by Imam Jafar, who saw the need for a systematic school of thought for those who sought guidance, and were loyal to Muhammad's family, as distinct from the new scholar schools which would synthesize into Sunni Islam. His answer was Jafari jurisprudence, a madhab school of jurisprudence distinct to the Shia. This period marks the founding of the distinct religious views of both the Shia and the Sunni. Imami schism. Jafar al-Sadiq was married to Fatima, herself a member of the Ahl al-Bayt. Together they had 2 sons, Ishmi al-Mubarak and his elder brother, Abdullah al-Aftar. Following Fatima's death, Jafar al-Sadiq was said to be so devastated he refused to ever remarry. The majority of available sources, both Ishmaili and Twelver as well as Sunni, indicate that Imam Jafar al-Sadiq designated Ishmi as his successor and the next Imam after him through Nas, and there is no doubt concerning the authenticity of this designation. However, it is controversially believed that Ishmi predeceased his father. However, the same sources report Ishmi being seen 3 days after in Basra. His closest supporters believed Ismail had gone into hiding to protect his life. Therefore, upon as-Sadiq's death, a group of Jafar al-Sadiq's followers turned to his eldest surviving son, Abdullah because he was the son of the daughter of the Caliph and the oldest son of Jafar al-Sadiq after Ishmael's death. He claimed a second designation following Ishmael's disappearance. Later most of them went back to the doctrine of the Imamate of his brother Musa, together with the evidence for the right of the latter and the clear proofs of his imamate when Abdallah died within weeks without an heir. Many more turned again to another son of as-Sadiq, Musa al-Kadhim, a son from a slave named Hamida, who Ja'far had taken after his wife's death, while some had already accepted him as the Imam following the death of Ja'far as-Sadiq. Abdullah's supporters now aligned themselves with him, giving him the majority of the Shia. Ismailists argue that since a defining quality of an Imam is his infallibility, Ja'far as-Sadiq could not have mistakenly passed his nas on to someone who would be either unfit to predecease him. Therefore, the Imam after Ishmi was his eldest son Muhammad ibn Ishmi, known as al-Maktum. The early Imams Ali, Hassan ibn Ali, Hussein ibn Ali, Ali ibn Hussein Zain al-Abidin, Muhammad al-Baqir, Ja'far al-Sadiq, Ishmi ibn Ja'far. Callers to Islam. Imam Muhammad al-Maktum retained Ishmael's closest supporters, who were few in number but highly disciplined, consisting of philosophers, scientists, and theologians. Like his father Imam Muhammad retained an interest in Greek philosophy, political, and scientific thought. Muhammad al-Maktum was himself several years the senior of his half-uncle, Musa al-Kadhim. Muhammad al-Maktum reconciled with Musa al-Kadhim and left Medina with his father's most loyal supporters, effectively disappearing from historical records and instituting an era of Dar al-Satr when the Imams would vanish from public view. There followed a period when mysterious intellectual writings of an Ismaili character appeared, most famously the Rasa'iq al-Safa, an enormous compendium of 52 epistles dealing with a wide variety of subjects including mathematics, natural sciences, psychology and theology. Ismaili leadership also produced an array of propaganda attacking the political and religious establishments with calls for popular revolution, through a Dawah propagation machine called Callers to Islam. This distinctive characteristic of the Ismaili to challenge established social, economic, and intellectual norms with the vision of a just society was directly opposed to Twelver quietism and political apathy, and would be a hallmark of Ismaili history. The Fatimid Caliphate. In the face of persecution, the bulk of the Ismaili continued to recognize imams who, as mentioned, secretly propagated the faith through du'at, callers to Islam, from the bases in Syria. However, by the 10th century, an Ismaili imam, Abdullah al-Mahdi Billah, correctly known as Abdullah al-Mahdi, had emigrated to North Africa and successfully established the Fatimid Caliphate in Tunisia. His success subsequently succeeded in conquering all of North Africa and the Fertile Crescent, and even holding Mecca and Medina in Arabia. The capital for the Fatimid state subsequently shifted to the newly founded city of Cairo, in honor of the Ismaili military victories, from which the Fatimid Caliph imams ruled for several generations, establishing the new city as a center for culture and civilization. It boasted the world's first university, Al-Azhar University, and the House of Knowledge, where the study of mathematics, art, biology, and philosophy reached new heights in the known world. A fundamental split amongst the Ismaili occurred as the result of a dispute over which son should succeed the 18th Imam and Fatimid Caliph, al-Mustanzir Billah. While Nizar was originally designated Imam, his younger brother al-Mustali was promptly installed as Imam in Cairo with the help of the powerful Armenian vizier Badr al-Jamali, whose daughter he was married to. Badr al-Jamali claimed that Imam Mustanzir had changed his choice of successor upon his deathbed, appointing his younger son. Although Nizar contested this claim, he was defeated after a short military campaign and imprisoned. However, he did gain support from an Ismaili Da'i based in Iran, Hassani Sabbah. Hassani Sabbah is noted by Western writers to have been the leader of the legendary assassins, Fatimid Caliphs. The Nizari Ismailis recognize only the first 8 Fatimid Caliphs from the 9 listed below: Abdullah al-Mahdi Billah, founder of the Fatimid dynasty; al-Qaim by Amra Allah, al-Mansur Billah, al-Muwazli din Allah. Egypt is conquered during his reign. Al-Aziz Billah, al-Hakim by Amra Allah, Ali Arizona Zahir, al-Mustanzir Billah, al-Mustali. Quarrels over his succession led to the Nizari split. Alamat most Ismailis outside North Africa, mostly in Iran and the Levant, came to acknowledge Imam Nizar ibn Mustanzir Billah's claim to the Imamate as maintained by Hassani Sabbah, and this point marks the fundamental split. Within 2 generations, the Fatimid Caliphate would suffer several more splits and eventually implode. Hassan began converting local inhabitants and much of the military stationed at the fortress to the Ismaili ideals of social justice and free thinking as he plotted to take over the fortress. During the final stages of his plan, he is believed to have lived within the fortress, possibly working as a chef under the pseudonym Dikandar. He seized the fortress in 1090 AD from its then ruler, a Zaydi Shia named Mahdi. This marks the founding of the Nizari Ismaili state. Mahdi's life was spared, and he later received 3,000 gold dinars in compensation. Hassani Sabbah termed his doctrine al-Dawah al-Jadida to contrast the Fatimid old preaching. He was viewed as the Hujjah or proof of the Imam, having direct secret contact with Imam Nizar and his rightful successors. Hassani Sabbah is also known as the first of the 7 lords of Alamat Castle, as he chose this secluded fortress as his base. Under the leadership of Hassani Sabbah and the succeeding lords of Alamat, the strategy of covert capture was successfully replicated at strategic fortresses across Iran, Iraq, and the Fertile Crescent. Nizar has created a state of unconnected fortresses, surrounded by huge swathes of hostile territory, and managed a unified power structure that proved more effective than either that in Fatimid Cairo or Seljuk Baghdad, both of which suffered political instability, particularly during the transition between leaders. These periods of internal turmoil allowed the Ismaili state respite from attack, and even to have such sovereignty as to have minted their own coinage. The fortress of Alamat was thought impregnable to any military attack, and was fabled for its heavenly gardens, impressive libraries, and laboratories where philosophers, scientists, and theologians could debate all matters in intellectual freedom. Assassination. Owing to the difficult situation in which the Ismailis were placed, the system of self-defense took a peculiar form. When the fortresses were attacked or besieged, they were isolated like small islands in a stormy sea. They prepared the garrisons for the fight, but were unable to mount a sizable army, so trained military commandos as a rearguard action. VIAF and were covertly dispatched into the very heart of the Abbasid court and enemy military strongholds as sleeper agents, in order to remove key figures planning or responsible for attacks against Ismaili populations. VIAF would take reprisal action for an attack, the planning of one by placing a dagger or a note within the chambers of their opponent as a warning, or even assassinating a key opponent when they deemed it necessary. Known today as assassins, these Ismailis were referred to as Hassashin by their enemies, as many of the political enemies believed them to consume the intoxicant hashish before being dispatched as agents, although modern scholarship tends to dispute this theory as polemic fabricated to discredit the Ismaili Other theories suggest the term originates from them being followers of Hassan. The term entered Western vocabulary through the returning Crusaders as Hassassin, the seven lords of Alamat Castle, Hassani Sabbah, Qiyu Buzurg Ahmad, Muhammad Buzurg Ahmad, the first concealed Imam of Alamat, El-Hadi bin el-Nizar, the second concealed Imam of Alamat, El-Mu'tadi bin al-Hadi, the third concealed Imam of Alamat, El-Kahir bin el-Mu'tadi by Kuvaylullah, by Arkamullah, Hassan to Ala Dekrihi Salam, Nuruddin Muhammad II, Jalaluddin Hasan III, Aladdin Muhammad III, Rukn al-Dinka Shah. The fortress was destroyed on December 15, 1256, by Hulagu Khan as part of the Mongol offensive on Islamic Southwest Asia. The Hassassin made a critical mistake in the murder of Genghis Khan's son, Jagati, who ruled part of Persia. Jagati had offended the Ismailis and Hassassin by forbidding certain rituals involved in prayer and slaughter of food animals. In 1256, the Mongols took the revenge. Most of the Hassassin were killed and the mountain-top fortresses destroyed. The church knights, already weakened by Mongol incursions and civil war, did not send assistance. The last leader of the Hassassin, Rukn al-Dinka Shah, surrendered it as part of a deal with Hulagu. However, the Mongols slaughtered the inhabitants, burned the libraries, and brought down the fortifications. Ismaili survivors made several attempts to recapture and restore Alamat and several other Ismaili forts, but were defeated. In subsequent years, the punishment for anyone suspected of being Ismaili would be instant death. It was common for political or social enemies to claim the rivals as secret Ismailis and call for their deaths. The wandering mystics, the Ismaili Imams, and the followers would wander around for several centuries in concealment. The Imams would often take on the garb of a tailor or mystic master, and the followers as Sufi Muslims. During this period, Iranian Sufism and Ismailism would form a close bond. Anjou-Dam period. With Safavid Iran's establishment of Twelver Islam as its official religion, many Sufi orders declared themselves to be Shia. Approximately 100 years before this, however, the Ismaili Imamate was being transferred to the village of Anjoudan, near the Shia centers of Qom and Kashan. This revival is commonly termed the Anjou-Dam period, and constituted a revival of Ismaili political stability. For the first time since the fall of Alamat, the Aga Khans. The period of the Aga Khans begins in 1817, when 45th Imam Shah Khalil was murdered while giving refuge to his followers by a Twelver mob led by local religious leaders. His wife took her 13-year-old son and new Imam, Hassan Ali Shah, to the then Qajar Emperor Shah in Tehran to seek justice. Although there was no serious penalty brought against those involved, Fath Ali Shah Qajar gave his daughter, the Princess Savi Jahan, in marriage to the new Imam, and awarded him the title Aga Khan.